think we're ready.
Great. All right. Amazing. We're all set. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth Portuguese American Artist Gallery Meet the Talk. The Portuguese American Artist Gallery is brought to you by the Embassy of Portugal in Washington, D.C., Palcus, the Chamber of Commerce, and FLAD. My name is Maria Brazão, and I am the Director of New York for Palcus. And joining me today to co-host the session is Elizabeth Casqueiro, member of the artist and member of the Portuguese American Artist Gallery team. We're excited to relaunch this initiative this year under the umbrella of Portuguese Americans in both the visual arts and performing arts. As I mentioned, this is now our fourth iteration of the series, and you can catch us always every second Tuesday of the month from 7 to 7:30 p.m. This session is going to be live streamed on Facebook as well as here in our Zoom, so feel free to ask any questions either in Facebook or here on Zoom. We will have time for those at the end, so feel free to drop those in and we will be monitoring and fielding those. So today we are here to meet the artist Michael De Brito. Thank you so much for being here today. Michael De Brito studied painting at the Parsons School of Design and New York Academy of Art. Michael has had multiple solo and group exhibitions with Eleanor Ettinger Gallery in New York, Galeria Graça Brandão in Lisbon, Portugal, and the Collins Galleries in Cape Cod. His work has been exhibited at the National Portrait Gallery in London, Abbaye Saint-André in France, Museu Afro in Brazil, and University of Maine Museum of Art in Bangor. In 2011, De Brito was commissioned to paint Justice Rui Manuel Gens de Moura Ramos, Presidente do Tribunal Constitucional from 2007-2012. The painting now hangs in the Tribunal Constitucional in Lisbon, Portugal. De Brito is a recipient of the Paula Krasner Granted and received the Frank C. Wright Memorial Award. His work is in the collections of the Nevada Museum of Art and the Tribunal Constitucional in Lisbon. He is represented by Collins Gallery in Cape Cod and Galeria Graça Brandão in Lisbon. Thank you so much for being here, Michael. We're so excited to chat once again and hear more about your art.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so just to kind of kick us off, can you just we'll start from the beginning. Can you tell us how it all started for you in the art field? How'd you get interested, and just that journey?
I guess starting for me was early on. I found drawing and art to be somewhat of an escape, and being in my dad's hardware store, somehow that was I needed somewhat of an escape there. And there was a gentleman that worked in the store, and he always was drawing, and I was just so mesmerized by his ability to come up with these ideas and just put it down on paper. So every day I would ask him, would get dropped off on my mom, and I would ask him to draw me things, and I would ask him to draw me a bike or a freestyle bike. And after a while, he just started getting tired of me asking him, and he just said, you should do it on your own. I think you can do it. And it just never dawned on me that was something that was possible to do. And when I started doing it, I just seemed somewhat easy to me to do it, but it was also so liberating at the same time. And then I would just grab stacks of paper and just go in the back of my dad's hardware store. And this is in Newark and Ferry Street, in the Portuguese section. My dad had this local hardware store, and I would get dropped off after school. And so that was what I would do. I'd spend my time in the back drawing. And so it just became my way of escape. But
that's so incredible. And so I know
a lot of your painting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You're good.
Oh dear.
You're good, Elizabeth.
Okay. I think my connection's a little unstable, but a lot of your work is, a lot of it seems to be dinner parties or families or.
I think we're having just some technical issues here. Sorry, Elizabeth, it's cutting out.
Okay, I'm going to change a
Perfect.
connection.
Sounds good. So Mike, we'll kind of keep it going on that same line, but so, you had this huge kind of contact when you were young, someone who really taught you. And then as we've talked and I've learned, you really were interested in comics at first. And then you had a shift while you were at school.
Yeah.
And that kind of changed a little bit of sort of where you wanted to kind of put your energy and time with your drawing and painting.
The correlation between what I do and comic books is it's there is like like a connection between all of it, right?
Yeah.
Compositionally, I think comics are wonderful with their panels and learning how to really balance. I think most of my ability to really understand composition came from comic books, especially color too. I think knowing how to use a limited palette and then apply that to even my paintings is it's still there. So I guess for me that segue it's still connected in a lot of ways. But it just happened that when I was at school, my painting teacher just put me on a path that just made me think more about painting than anything else. And so I felt so connected to it. It was something that was challenging, but still uh, felt that it was something that I wanted to tackle and get good at. And it just seemed like a good way of going from comics to that. It seemed like the right path.
Um, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if did you answer my question? I'm not sure if
No, no,
I cut out,
it
but
cut out. Mhm.
it cut out. Yeah. How is the influence of your Portuguese roots showing up in your work, or
Uh,
or or does it not?
well, I think because the work is not necessarily directly Portuguese, I guess it comes through because my family obviously is Portuguese. It's more of a study of assimilation, I guess, right? People, immigrants coming to the United States, trying to find their way within another culture, but not lose themselves within it. And I think my paintings are a lot about that. The table just happens to be something that responds to me and to a lot of people, and it seems to connect with people in that way. I found that was my way of really communicating this idea, right? Where, especially for Portuguese people, eating and dining at a table is it's very common, right? So I think that's where it comes through. That the search of it just seemed to happen. I think a lot of it is inspired by Diego Velázquez. I think the early painting was of a woman frying eggs with a boy next to her. And I think that painting I looked at that and I thought there could be a way to do this, but more in a modern context, right? So I started looking for that, and early on, I had other subject matter, right? People on the train and things like that. But I had done a painting of my grandparents. I was walking to my grandparents' house. I would have lunch with them basically every day, Monday through Friday, and I would sit with them. And I remember not even thinking of that as a painting, and I had walked out and so what's interesting is that Portuguese people, especially in Newark area, a lot of the kitchen is downstairs, right? We have a dining table upstairs that no one ever used. I mean, for 40 years, I don't think everybody's ever used this table. And so that stays like the nice table and everybody eats downstairs. And so I had walked downstairs. When I saw my grandparents at the table, I knew right there. I said, this is how I'm going to communicate my who I am and my family to everyone else. So
And I can definitely attest that even seeing those paintings, like you just feel like you're there. I think any sort of Portuguese American and growing up in that sort of assimilation can just feel the essence of that, and it comes through so strongly. And so, on that note, I want to hear more just about your process and technique. I know you have some artwork there that you want to show us, but I think a beautiful part of your paintings, it's capturing a moment, but still having a sort of a technique to it that it doesn't look exactly like a photograph. It has this beautiful kind of essence of the moment.
yeah, I think the goal for me is always to keep it feeling like that it is caught in that spontaneous moment. I don't really want it to feel stagnant at all, right? But I think a lot of that comes from sketching. So for me, I brought like a little, so I carry a little tiny sketchbook like this. And this is more of like in the last 2 years. I used to carry these like 8x11 ones because this comes from me being at Parsons. My professors there would like starting off, they would say, you have to carry this every single day. And I do. And that's something that the discipline that I learned at school has stayed with me, and carrying a sketchbook all the time is something that I always do. And so for me, it starts off with a sketch, and whether it's these kids behind me or those table settings, it's always just starting with the sketch. If it seems like something's coming through, I'll continue with the sketch and then take photos and try to do some color studies. If the person's willing to sit, I can do painting. I'll paint from life. A lot of times in these settings, I take multiple reference, and then if I need to, then I can also manipulate it in Photoshop as well too, because I always find that I want everything to work. So I'm very much into color, into composition, into pattern, right? So even though it's subtle, like the stripe on the boy's pants, right, or the checkered tablecloth that are on my paintings, a lot of these things I find that are elements that always need to be in paintings. But I think that comes through and kind of keeping these sketchbooks kind of working through. So just to give you an idea of like, sometimes it's things that, they're quick, and other times it's just, I doodle all over. So it's just layered and layered of just, it's almost like a visual diary, right? I try not to, stay caught up on it being about one page, and each page has to be this perfect sketch. So if the person is sitting, right, I just will do a sketch, and if it seems like it's working as a painting, then the next step is then doing further drawing and investigating it further. And then from there, then it turns into a painting, right? So, yeah.
So actually, it's interesting segue, because we have a question, which is, where does Michael find motivation for his next piece of work? So
Yeah, I mean, I love just kind of letting it come to me. I don't force it. I try to think about it, but sometimes, right now I'm working on a large painting of two women tubing on these like floating tubes. And we were on a boat trip, and we were in this place called Tyson Shoal. And I just kind of looked and saw the scene, and again, it just happened, and it just caught my eye, and from there, I wanted to paint it. And so sometimes these inspirations pan out, and other times they don't, but for the most part, I love letting it kind of just happen, organically.
mhm.
Yeah.
I find when we last talked, what was very interesting was the scale of your work.
Right.
And like the one behind you, as we look at it here, you can't really tell what the scale is, but it's actually much bigger than.
Yeah, so I think I like a diverse body of work, right? So everything from small paintings, just give me 1 second, sorry. From small paintings, I work on little paintings, things like this, right? These are
Yeah.
little, small, tiny paintings. Well, and then so these paintings, and so it's good to kind of really get a sense of scale, right? So this painting is 8.5 feet by 10 feet, right? So yeah, I mean it's a lot to take on, but I enjoy it. I love larger scale. I love being able to kind of step back. Paintings like this, you can appreciate them close up, but I think getting a good step back 10 feet or so really helps with getting a really like a sense of the whole painting.
And it seems you paint on loose canvas. You enjoy
Yeah,
doing that, and then
I'm,
you stretch it later.
yeah, so I like working this way because it doesn't restrict me to my size, right? For the most part, it allows me to at least have some leeway with about 3 to 4 inches per side. So if I decide to crop it smaller, that's fine. But if I decide then to go a little bit bigger, then I still have the opportunity to kind of do that later on. I was speaking earlier before, and I was just saying that early on I felt constricted when I had a stretch canvas. Now again, I think others, if it works for them, I don't see an issue with it. I just think for me, being able to have that kind of ability and flexibility to kind of grow the painting, it just always seemed like it worked better for me.
Yeah. I think it's kind of not limiting yourself. And I know this piece you've been working on for a while now, right? Kind of go back and to it and in certain periods.
Yeah, I think I started this painting in 21, I think, something like that. And I just started with painting the boys' head, and it just didn't seem like maybe I've recently felt more that I think there's a time when some paintings you're ready for, and I just I don't know if I was ready for it at the time. So I painted the heads, and then I rolled up the painting and I left it for about a year and a half. And at some point in the mix of working on my house and things like that too, moving things around in my studio, I had taken a look at it, and it just seemed like it was time. And so I felt that the painting looked decent and looked good. So I just started working on it. So what I ended up doing with this one is it's kind of my warm up in certain areas. Like we were talking about the grass earlier, right? The grass in my mind doesn't necessitate me giving all my brain power, right? Say if I'm painting hands or legs or a face or things like that. So I kind of work into it, and then it gives me then the ability to feel like loosened up, where then I can work on another painting. So I tend to work on 5 or 6 paintings at the same time. I don't like being like stuck on one, because in the past what would happen, I would paint, and then if I got frustrated in an area, I would then keep repeating the same thing. And so what I do is I get to a point in the painting, if I'm stuck, or even if it's I'm at a good point, I tend to try to let it be, and then work on another painting, work on that for a couple days, and then go to another painting, work on that, and then just keep bouncing around. It also feels fresh, right? And I think I always want to look at the painting in a way where I'm not frustrated or tired of it.
No, that makes total sense, just to kind of take a step away and be able to look at it with a new kind of pair of eyes.
Do you work in oil,
Yes.
or it's all oil painting, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part, oils. I have been working recently with pastels. I enjoy pastels immensely. So they're a little tricky because they're very delicate. So I tend to cover them until I exhibit them. I've found spraying them doesn't really work for me, because I've noticed most of the sprays that I've used tend to dull the color, and pastels have this beautiful, rich color in the pigment. So what I do is I have one here. Sorry. I have one here, and you can see like I use this vellum and I cover it until I'm ready to, hang it up. But they're beautiful in the sense of just having those pigments being so intense. In one second, I'll show you. You can see here, you can see how vivid some of these colors are. And so you can get immense depth too. And I tend to work a little bit differently. Sometimes I feel I tend to try to paint more with it than I do draw with it. So, but I found pastel to be such an amazing medium as well. So, but anyway, I mean, my love is always oil, but I like taking a break and doing a pastel or two.
Yeah, you can see just how vivid with the pastel it is, just kind of the lighting too. And we do have another question from the audience, Nicole, asking, how did you decide to become a realistic painter slash artist, which I know we touched upon a little bit at the beginning, but
Yeah.
if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Yeah, I enjoy looking at all the different types of art, but for me, the reason why I paint is because of my passion for painters like Velasquez and John Singer Sargent and Edward Manet. Uh, I guess for me, I like looking at that, so I tend to paint what I like looking at. And going to museums and seeing those painters, I like to emulate that, and so that's kind of the beginnings of where it's taken me. So
And I know you've talked a lot about artists that have inspired you, and I know you're also teaching as well. And so I'm just curious how that process has been, from being artist, but then now kind of teaching the next artist. It's a different lens. So curious to hear how that process is for you.
yeah, I think teaching it's been some time now. In the beginning, it was a little strange because I painted so much, but then I thought to myself, what do I have to teach these people, right? So, but I thought, and then I started to realize that if they're here to listen to what I have to say, then maybe I can give something back. And I think that's mainly my objective when I teach. It's really to help guide people to be the better versions as artists of themselves, right? So, um, and to me, I find that I don't necessarily want people to be paint like me. So I want them to find themselves. And so I tell them to go kind of what I did and what my teachers did, in sort of a way of try to find your identity through the work that you're interested in, right? And so I think for me, that's the best approach to teaching.
On that note, I don't know if you teach children or young people or older people or all ages. And what do you see that if you're younger, people will absorb more the teachings?
I
Or
really
not?
think I depends. I find that it's like categorizing it's tough because I've taught like students from third through fifth, all the way up through high school to adults, right? And it really just comes down to like if they're interested and they're passionate about it. I've had third graders that were so passionate that loved every second of being in the class, and not to say that the whole class was that way, but those children always kind of reminded me of myself. And I think that, again, you can see that that person is always going to be passionate about it. And then their parents would come to me and then talk to me about like the direction that they should go in. And I really value that. Again, even when in their high school, it's the same thing. And I've taught portfolio development classes, and those classes are amazing. And I also think, and each person is different. So you try to kind of gear each lesson and things like that to them, especially if they're building a portfolio. But yeah, if they're passionate about it, and I'll just give it right back. And I think that that's the best approach, right? Even with adults, same thing.
Yeah, I think yeah, just every person has their style, their way in. So I think that's great. And do you want to,
I think sometimes people just enjoy the process of art making,
yeah,
and I can't always push on them that they have to be the next painter, right? And so sometimes I have to then step back and say that this person enjoys making art. They don't necessarily need it to be out in the world. It's just something that they do to pass the time. And so there's moments like that, and I think you learn from that as well
yeah,
too.
absolutely. Kind of find the joy just in the process and
Yes.
not that as much pressure on the outcome. And I think we'd love to hear just kind of where you're putting your energy right now, some works, anything you're working on, any projects, upcoming kind of showings. I know you have your art kind of all over the place, but
Yeah, well, right now, I sent work to Barcelona. So I have a piece in the Mod Portrait exhibition on May 14th. So if you happen to be in Spain, you can stop in and check out the artwork that's going to be in that show. And I've been working, I'm finishing this piece, and then I want to work on a series that I've done studies of folk Portuguese rancho dancers. And this has been stewing in my brain for a while. And so I'm trying to kind of get that work going too. I think that'll be a nice segue into the things that I've done too. Yeah, so that's what I've been working on.
And we have one more question here from the audience asking, how do you select the people you paint? So I know sometimes it happens kind of naturally, but do you have more of like a targeted approach at times?
Say again about the question.
How do you select the people you paint?
Yeah, there has to be something that communicates some sort of character from. I tend to look at my paintings not as people, but as characters telling a story. Something for the most part, it's my story, but I tend to find that if they're interesting and they communicate and translate well onto as a painting, I think that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, an example would be there's a woman that is neighbors with my grandmother. This amazing Portuguese woman, but she is very like she's such a character. She looks like olive oil from Popeye, right? And she comes over and she talks to my grandmother, and even the way she dresses, it reminds me of like the older generation Portuguese from from the south of Portugal. And I find things like that just always connect with. But yeah.
Great. We have some questions from Facebook actually.
Oh, okay.
So some people are asking, so there's two questions. Do you paint abstract art and do you accept commissions?
Commissions depends on the subject matter, but I do. Sometimes if it seems appealing to me, then I seem to take it on. And abstract, I don't really paint abstract. I find that my work, if you look at it up close, it tends to be pretty abstract. Seems to look like put together, but the way I approach my paintings, here, let me just show you real quick and you can kind of get an understanding of a lot. So if you look, say, at these flowers, right? I'll bring the painting closer. Give it a sec. And you can see I approach it in that way, right? I tend not to render it or anything like that. For the most part, these flowers are painted with 6, 7 brush strokes, right? And it's a way to try to limit it from looking kind of stagnant. And so I like working that way.
Great.
And then you can see, I'll show you on one more painting and you can look at this one too.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So with this one, if you look, I mean, you can look up close, I'm gonna just point. And so even in these areas, trying to make this look like it's clear and see-through with these speckles of glitter, you really have to kind of think more abstract. And I find that that's my approach. And so that's how when I teach, I understand abstract painting because it's a similar approach, right? Looking at these shapes in a way that it's not what you think it is, right? So essentially, these are all distortions of everything that's around her, right? So this could be a distortion maybe of her head, but the way that I approach it is based on shapes.
Wow.
So, and even in here too, I mean, it's so distorted and abstract. I don't know if I'll try to bring the camera up a little closer so you can see, but you can see how abstract all of this is, right? And even here, you can see how the approach is very much painterly, but also just limiting going into it and rendering. There's hardly any blending or anything like that. I work direct. I kind of mix all of my values and colors at once and then kind of apply. So, but again, going back to the abstract thing, this is how I kind of understand it that way.
Very cool. Those are beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing those. So I know we're coming up on time here. Elizabeth, do you have one more question?
No, not a question, just an observation. As an artist myself, how remarkable your use of light and dark, and also how, even though it's figurative, it's not photographic. There's there's an aliveness there that's that you can't even get in a photograph. It's just beautiful.
Brilliant.
And I think that's my pursuit in painting is always that, is trying to give it life beyond whatever reference you have. And if it connects and it's work and it's successful, then I think that's the objective in a good painting, right? So.
Mhm.
I think it definitely does. I know we've all been moved, and we've posted a lot on our socials, so it's been great. But we are coming up at time, so I just want to thank you so much, Michael. I don't know if there's
Thanks for
anything else
having
you
me.
want to share with us before we kind of wrap it up.
I enjoyed spending time with you guys and talking about art anytime is always fun. So.
And if you haven't checked out Michael's work already, you can go to PortugueseAmericanArtGallery.com. It is under Michael De Brito. Check out, there's a full series up. It's absolutely gorgeous. So just want to thank everyone. We have even some chats coming in saying amazing work. So truly kudos to you. So thank you for coming, and just want to let everyone know that we will have our next Meet the Artist talk on May 14th from 7 to 7:30 p.m. So yeah, make sure to also give Michael a follow on social media to check out more work, and just make sure to check out that PortugueseAmericanArtGallery.com. So thank you very much. Always a great time getting
And
to
thank you to
sit
both of
down
you.
and talk through.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you.